Have my baby already? He says, as if it's the most natural thing in the world. Coming from someone I've long severed ties with, it's anything but pleasing. In fact, it's downright repulsive. And let's not forget, it was Ken who unilaterally filed for divorce. Now, he's acting all entitled, which is just too much. I stay silent, but Ken, misunderstanding my quietness, laughs out loud. You can't live without me, can you? I'm already remarried. What? Ken's voice turns incredulous, and I can't help but laugh. I never thought you were such a slut, he exclaims. But his words don't affect me in the slightest. I simply tell him, don't ever contact me again, and hang up without waiting for a response. Julie, what's wrong? Well, actually. I start to explain the phone call to Mark, who immediately offers to help. Turns out, he had received a call from another person as well and was planning to deal with both. Looking forward to the retribution against those two who hurt me, I begin to make some tea. My name is Julie. I'm a 35-year-old housewife. After divorcing my ex-husband 5 years ago, I remarried. Now, I'm a mother. My marriage to my ex was a nightmare, but now, I'm genuinely happy. Ken and I met at the reception desk of a trading company, where he was the one to make the first move. My parents, wanting their only daughter to marry for love, supported my relationship with Ken. Once we had their blessing, the engagement happened in no time. And we were married within a year of dating. Ken had a bit of a domineering streak, but he was generally kind, and our marriage was going well. However, 6 months into our marriage, Ken's attitude took a 180-degree turn. Hey, dinner. What? He'd demand out of the blue. Confused, I'd hesitate, recalling how just the day before, we'd discuss what to have for dinner or what we felt like eating. As I pondered what to say, Ken would grow impatient. I'm starving. Hurry up with the food. But I haven't even started cooking yet. Useless woman. Forget it. Where are you going? He'd snap and storm out, leaving me to stare at the door he slammed shut, wondering what I'd done wrong. No matter how much I thought about it, I couldn't understand. Ken wouldn't return until the next morning, heading straight for a shower and then locking himself in the bedroom. It was actually my birthday that day, and we had plans to go out for dinner, but I couldn't bring myself to remind him. Instead, I started on the housework. Hey. The vacuum cleaner's too loud. Are you trying to annoy me? No, it's just that since we're not going out, I thought I'd clean up. It's your fault we're not going out. I have a headache, just keep it down. I'm sorry. Looking back, it was clear Ken was in the wrong, but at the time, I blamed myself for upsetting him. And once he realized he could get away with it, Ken's behavior only got worse. This meal's terrible. Make it again. Huh. Got a problem with that? No problem. I'm sorry. Being criticized for every meal and every cleaning task, I grew exhausted. Yet, I loved Ken and believed he would become kind again. That's why I strained myself daily, doing housework. But that was a mistake. You're like a mannequin, so boring. Ken spat out one day before leaving the house. And upon returning, he triumphantly declared, I cheated on you. Why? Because you're not satisfied. Do you have a problem with that? But we're married. Ken's eyes widened in anger. You have a problem with what I do? It's not that, but... It's not but. Don't you even know how to respect your husband? Ken slammed his hand against the wall. His action made me shrink back, as he towered over me by at least 8 inches. Then, Ken suddenly spoke in a soothing tone. I don't want to do this. If only you'd try harder. Right, I'll try harder. That's right. A husband's affair is the wife's fault. Hearing this, I began to believe it was true and nodded. After that, Ken started lashing out at things whenever he was displeased, always soothing me with a gentle voice afterward. I'm doing this for you. Became his mantra, trapping me in a cycle of self-blame. One day, Ken brought home a young woman. This woman is pregnant with my child, so she'll live here from today. What do you mean? The woman answered smugly. It means since I'm pregnant with Ken's baby, you're no longer needed. I'm Anna, married to Ken now, and moving in today. Well. The sudden news of her moving in, pregnancy, and marriage overwhelmed me. I was confused. Ken and I were married. We hadn't divorced. Yet, why was this woman claiming to be married to Ken? Ken loudly explained. I'm tired of you, and I've filed for divorce. Anna helped me with it, so be thankful. Thankful? But what about the divorce? I don't care. Though, I might keep you as a maid. Ken smirked at his own joke. That's when I woke up to reality. No, thank you. I'll be leaving now. Going back to your parents? Make sure you admit it's your fault. No, I'll tell them everything, exactly as it happened. Hey, wait! Ignoring Ken's protests, I took my belongings and left. Arriving at my parents, they were shocked and asked for the full story. I told them everything, without hiding a detail. They listened to the end and joined me in my anger. My parents and I immediately sought the advice of my father's company lawyer. We demanded alimony from Ken. Of course, he refused, but with Ken having filed for divorce on his own and then remarried, not to mention a baby on the way, there was no way they could escape responsibility. Their payment was made in lump sums, which seemed to have put them in debt, but that's none of my concern. I started working again, on my own. Initially, I considered going back to being an office worker, but since I liked housekeeping, I started taking on housekeeping jobs privately, thanks to my parents' connections. Thanks to word of mouth, my client list grew from 1 or 2 people to having requests every day. One of my clients was Mark. He was a wealthy man who traveled the world alone, delivering supplies to children and teaching them. Because he was only home a few times a month, he gave me the keys to his house and asked me to clean it. At first, I refused, but after being repeatedly asked by someone who was referred to me through an acquaintance, I agreed to clean his house a few times a month. Eventually, Mark started asking me to clean while he was in the US. Mark, who prefers simplicity, turned out to have a lot in common with me, and we often had engaging conversations. After living this way for about 2 years, Mark said something I hadn't expected. Julie, I've fallen for you. Would you consider dating me with marriage in mind? What? Mark was handsome and smart, so I was sure there were better women out there for him. That's why I initially refused. However, Mark didn't give up and kept asking me out on dates. I still remember how happy he looked when I finally agreed to go out with him just once. Eventually, after several dates, Mark confessed his feelings again, and I agreed to start dating him. He quickly introduced me to his parents, openly stating that we were dating with the intention of getting married. My in-laws were very kind and didn't mind that I was divorced, treating me with great kindness. About a year into our relationship, we got remarried. And 2 months later, I found out I was pregnant with our first child. Our marriage has been very smooth, and I quit my job to focus on our home. Mark, who was already capable of doing housework, often helped out. Moreover, with a child on the way, Mark decided to stay here but wanted to continue his activities. He established an organization, became its representative, and launched a company that generates revenue here to support children overseas. The happiness of Julie and our unborn child is my top priority. Mark always says, treating my parents with great respect. Life with Ken was unimaginable compared to the peaceful days now, making me feel very happy every day. With the alimony payments from the 2 of them completed, I rarely thought about the past. However, one day, I received an anonymous call on my phone. Since Mark was away for work, I initially didn't answer, but the persistent ringing forced me to pick up. Hello? Julie? Who is this? It's me. Surely, you haven't forgotten, right? Hearing that voice made my spine freeze. No way. I couldn't understand why he would call now. Ken? That's right. Good job, Julie. Being praised like that didn't make me happy at all. I wanted to end the call quickly and urged him to get to the point. "What do you want?" "You're being quite formal." Ken cheerfully shared his recent events, none of which had anything to do with me. "This has nothing to do with me, right? Don't be like that, surely you've reflected by now?" Reflected? I was genuinely confused and repeated the word. Just then, Mark came home. I gestured to him. And at the same time, Ken, still laughing on the other end of the phone, got to his main point. "Yeah, if you've reflected, I'll consider taking you back." Taking me back? Have my baby already? Isn't exactly what you want to hear from someone you've cut ties with? It's not pleasant, it's creepy. And let's not forget, it was Ken who filed for divorce on his own accord. It's too late to be playing the good guy now. Silent at his words, Ken, misunderstanding my quiet, laughed loudly. "You can't live without me, can you? I'm already remarried." "What?" Ken's voice was incredulous, and I couldn't help but laugh. "I never thought you were such a slut." But his words didn't affect me. I simply told him, "Don't contact me ever again," and hung up without waiting for his reply. "Julie, what happened?" "Well, actually, I started to tell Mark about the call, and he immediately said he'd handle it. Turns out, he had received a call from someone else as well and planned to deal with them together. As I made coffee, I looked forward to the retribution against those two who hurt me. A few days later, a lawyer visited our home. He had helped me during my divorce and now worked not only for my father's company but also for Mark's. I told him what happened, and he agreed to take care of it. While discussing this with Mark and the lawyer, my phone rang. I looked at them, placed my phone on the table, and answered the speaker. "Julie. It was too sudden yesterday, and you got confused. But lying because you're mad isn't right. You haven't remarried, have you?" "I'm still here." His selfish interpretation made me sigh. Was I really in love with this man? Sensing how I felt, Mark responded with a wry smile. "That's not a lie. I am Julie's current husband." "Huh? What are you talking about?" "Julie, you should just report this delusional guy to the police." "It's not a delusion. We are truly married. Our marriage is registered," Mark said calmly, which only irritated Ken more. I made it clear to Ken. What he's saying is true. I'm remarried. So, don't contact me again. Stop sulking. Are you saying that because someone told you to? No. If you want, our lawyer is here now, he can confirm it for you. The moment I mentioned the lawyer, Ken clicked his tongue over the phone. Then, with a frustrated voice, he ordered. "Then divorce him and come back to me. I'll forgive you if you apologize properly. I'll come to pick you up tomorrow." Ken's inability to understand was headache-inducing. Then, the lawyer spoke up quietly. "Ken, you do realize there's a restraining order against you approaching Julie, right? If you contact her, it'll cost you in damages." "What? That's expired, isn't it?" "Absolutely not. It's still very much in effect." Finally, Ken's momentum was cut short by the lawyer's words. Yet, Ken tried to persuade me with a softer voice. "Julie? You'd be happier with me. Is there really no chance?" "It's impossible. I have a child now." "What? A child?" Ken was silenced by shock. Mark then declared, "I can make Julie happier than a self-centered, domineering man like you. We will not divorce, and she will never return to you." I nodded in agreement and held Mark's hand. Then, while Ken was still silent, I hung up. 2 weeks passed without a call from Ken, which made me think he had given up. But just when I felt relieved, our doorbell rang unexpectedly one day. Who could it be? Standing in front of the intercom, I was shocked. There were Ken and Anna, his affair partner, whom I heard had broken up but were apparently still connected. I pressed the record button on my smartphone and answered. "You know there's a restraining order, right? If you're so rich, Give back the alimony. Watching them after 5 years, I thought people really do change, but it seemed they were after money, showing up at our house. My wealth and returning your alimony don't relate. It's the same. How much money do you want? No, it's not like that. Despite their infidelity, they were brazenly demanding. Confused, I didn't know how to respond. Then, Anna started to spill the beans without any prompting. I got engaged. He's a supervisor at work, and he's a great guy. I can't tell him about my debt. You understand, right? Congratulations on your engagement. However, what does that have to do with the alimony? I was genuinely confused, but it seemed my question rubbed Anna the wrong way. Even through the intercom, it was clear she was starting to get angry. That's why. I'll forgive the debt part if you just return the money. You're not struggling for money, are you? I heard you're rich. Anna screamed hysterically, instilling fear in me. Though she couldn't enter due to the autolock, I worried about her breaking in through a window. As I pondered this, Anna screamed again. And how did you even manage to snag such a handsome guy? He suits me better, hand him over. I'm sorry, but my husband isn't an object to be passed around. I know that much. Anna interrupted immediately after my reply, and Ken, standing behind her, burst out laughing. It might have been funny, but it was rude. Anna then turned her anger towards Ken. I had no idea you were broke. Ken snapped back. You lied about being pregnant. That was a misunderstanding. Huh? You were so sure of yourself. They began to argue, forgetting I was there. Was the pregnancy a lie after all? I felt a thorn in my heart disappear. Just then, a police officer appeared on the intercom screen. It's not what it looks like. No, officer, it's just a small quarrel. They started making excuses. But the police officer wasn't buying it and took them away. I slumped down by the intercom. Thank goodness they didn't get in. Are you okay? It turned out Mark had called the police. Before answering the intercom, I had contacted Mark, who told me to record the conversation and that he'd be right back. Sorry for bothering you while you're busy, and thank you. Julie's safety is the top priority, don't worry about it. I felt grateful for Mark. Remarrying him was truly the best decision. I felt this from the bottom of my heart. The lawyer had informed the police about the restraining order, so Ken and Anna were thoroughly scolded. But then we started receiving daily calls from the lawyer about returning the money. It seems best to settle this matter once and for all. After receiving a call from the lawyer, Mark and I decided to face them head-on. When told we would meet through the lawyer, Anna and Ken happily agreed, probably thinking they'd get money. We prepared thoroughly and awaited the day of reckoning. On the day, my parents also came, having been informed in advance. When we arrived at the designated place, Anna and Ken were already there, and unbelievably, my former in-laws were there too. They glared at me as soon as they saw me. Thank you all for gathering here today. Let's begin the discussion. Everyone looked at me as I placed 2 pieces of paper on the table. They were invoices for breaching the restraining order. Ken and Anna's eyes widened at the amounts listed. No way! That's impossible! $60,000 each was written on the papers. They complained to me, flabbergasted by the amount. Then, my former mother-in-law spoke up. Julie, are you getting too carried away? What? I was puzzled. And the former mother-in-law laughed mockingly before starting to talk. I've already paid alimony. And yet, you're trying to extort more money. I thought wealthy people were more laid back, but you're quite petty, aren't you? Petty, you say? Essentially, she was suggesting that I drop the current charges. However, I had no intention of doing so. Indeed, I'm not struggling financially, but this is a penalty for not keeping their promise. They have an obligation to pay. I explained this to my former mother-in-law. But she was not convinced. After all, you were once a daughter-in-law, weren't you? To be so forward. I could never imagine doing such a thing," she said. Ken and Anna nodded in agreement with her. Their unanimous opinion made them surprisingly bold. I sighed and played the recording from the other day. The former mother-in-law blushed with embarrassment upon hearing it. Mark pointed it out. "Are you embarrassed? A man nearing 40 getting into trouble with the police outside his ex-wife's house. I would be too ashamed to show my face in public." The former mother-in-law glared at Mark but seemed too mortified to retort, grinding her teeth in frustration. I felt I had to say something. "Well, it's good that nothing was broken. If the statue had been damaged, that would have been a disaster. It cost about $1.6 million, after all." $1.6 million? The former mother-in-law turned pale at my words. Ken and Anna were gaping. That's when I realized I had never mentioned my parents' assets to Ken. My parents' total assets are around $580 million. So, it's not a big deal for us, but it would have been troublesome for Ken and Anna if it came to compensation. $580 million? No way! Why would I lie? Realizing the truth in my words, Ken slumped, his face drained of color. Anna, though, suddenly sparkled with interest and turned to Mark. "Then, Mark, you must be quite wealthy too, right?" "What?" Mark showed his disgust clearly, but Anna kept talking without hesitation. Indeed, Mark's total assets were similar to my parents'. But that was irrelevant to the current discussion. "Why don't you ditch such a greedy wife and marry me instead? I'm pretty, and I'd look great in a dress." Anna was indeed young and beautiful, enviable even. But Mark looked at her coldly. "No matter how beautiful you are, I will never be swayed. To me, my wife is the most beautiful and precious person in the world." Being praised so directly made me a bit embarrassed. As I blushed, Anna glared at me with jealousy. Then I remembered something and mentioned it to Anna. "By the way, I met an acquaintance of Mark's the other day. It happened to be the president of Anna's company." "What did you say?" When he asked about Anna, I told him she was Ken's remarriage partner, but they divorced quickly. I said as Anna's eyes widened, and then she burst into tears. I was just being honest, but I felt I had to offer one more piece of advice. "Anna, I heard you've been unfaithful again. That's not good. Moreover, you should accurately disclose your marital history, or you won't be able to build a trustful relationship with your partner." "What have you done to me?" "I just told the truth," I responded with a smile. When Ken brought Anna, I was deeply hurt. This bit of revenge seemed quite mild in comparison. Just then, Mark's phone rang. After a brief conversation, he hung up and addressed Anna. "I just got a call from the president. He said your engagement with his son is off." "No!" Anna screamed and collapsed onto the table. While it was a pitiable sight, it didn't really concern me. "So, we'll be expecting your payment," I said, which brought the former mother-in-law to snap back at me. "Because of you, Ken is going to be in debt again. Don't you feel bad?" "Right. Don't you have any guilt?" I pondered for a moment. I was merely doing what was necessary. There wasn't much room for emotions in that. Then, I remembered something I hadn't mentioned yet. "Oh, right. Ken's company was bought out by my husband's company. He'll be going there for an audit report soon. Please take care." "No way!" I don't lie, do I? I looked to Mark for confirmation, and he nodded. Seeing this, Ken slumped, seemingly lost for words. However, the former mother-in-law didn't give up and tried to argue further. That's when the usually silent former father-in-law spoke up. "Julie, I'm truly sorry. Please allow me to apologize on behalf of these two." He started apologizing, which took me aback. During my marriage, he was the one who often criticized Ken's actions and the former mother-in-law's snide remarks. He even insisted on paying the alimony in full, even if it meant taking on debt. That's why I never harbored any ill feelings towards him. "Please don't apologize." "Let me apologize." The former mother-in-law looked at him as if seeing something unbelievable. I'll make sure they pay the alimony in full, even if it means taking on more debt. And I'm divorcing your mother. Divorce? Why? I can't stand your lack of common sense any longer. The former mother-in-law turned pale and clung to him. But his decision was firm, and realizing this, she became as despondent as Ken, unable to argue back. We'll just need your signatures for the payment, and then we're done here. Come on, you two, sign it already. Urged by the former father-in-law's shout, Ken and Anna reluctantly signed the payment agreement. My parents, Mark, and I verified the signatures before leaving. As we were about to leave the room, my parents, who had been silent, spoke up. Was irreconcilable differences the reason for your divorce? Indeed, our values are very different. So, we ask that you refrain from any further involvement with us. The daughter you hurt is now very happy. If you intend to disrupt this happiness, be prepared. Feeling the love from both of my parents, I was moved to tears. Mark, holding my hand, smiled at me. Leaving the aftermath to the former father-in-law, we left the scene. Later, the fine for the restraining order was duly paid. How they managed it was a mystery, but it didn't matter. Ken apparently lost his job after failing an audit. Allegedly, flirting with girls during work hours, slacking off, and just being incompetent were the reasons. Back when we were married, Ken seemed like he was competent at his job, but it turned out he just dumped all his work on his juniors, who eventually got promoted while he was sidelined. As soon as his performance reviews turned bad, he was the first to be offered an early retirement package. Ken accepted the early retirement, but the severance pay went to paying off his debts, and I heard through the grapevine that he's been looking for another job. However, almost no company in the same industry would hire him, and he's been making ends meet by working part-time at a store. Anna, after breaking off her engagement, faced more troubles as it came out she had another man, and she's being sued for alimony. Unable to make ends meet, she quit her job and is now working at a nightclub. I thought she'd continue using her looks to her advantage, but at 28, she's considered too old in the nightclub scene, hardly makes anything, and works a part-time job during the day. As much as I pity her as a woman, I also think she brought this upon herself. The former father-in-law really did go through with the divorce and even came to apologize to me. He wished me happiness, and I was able to express my gratitude. He's now back at his parents' home, dedicating himself to farming, and I hope he stays healthy for as long as possible. As for the former mother-in-law, after the divorce, she moved in with Ken, living off him since she's never worked a day in her life. The father-in-law mentioned that she's a big spender and there's constant yelling in the house every day. I recently gave birth to a beautiful baby girl. Mark is completely smitten and takes care of her, allowing me to rest well. He even took paternity leave, so we've been able to manage childcare quite relaxedly during the day. We enjoy our time talking about this and that concerning our daughter, which has been truly blissful. My parents adore their first grandchild, bringing new toys every visit. To the point where we had to remodel a room into a toy room because of the sheer number of toys. Mark and I are looking forward to taking our daughter on an overseas trip once she's a bit older. I'm thrilled about our bright future, feeling incredibly blessed. Julie! It's almost time for feeding! Coming! I'll be right there! Today, Mark is taking care of everything except breastfeeding, so I've had some time to read. After enjoying some decaf tea, I stood up and headed to the living room. There, I found our daughter crying and Mark, despite being a bit flustered, looking blissfully happy. It was such a picture-perfect moment of happiness that I couldn't help but smile. What are you smiling about? Oh, nothing. With that, I took our daughter from Mark and began to breastfeed. I have a strange feeling that this happiness will last forever. It's a bright day outside. After feeding, we should all go for a walk. I shared this thought with Mark and smiled.